What if the absence of sex isn't just about the body, but about the soul's evolution? What if what you call loneliness or lack of passion is actually the way your spirit is being refined through silence, emptiness, and restraint? Carl Jung once said that every form of energy we repress doesn't die, it transforms. So when a person lives without sex, that raw creative force doesn't disappear. It turns inward. It begins to carve new paths in the psyche, demanding expression through dreams, impulses, and spiritual awakenings that few understand. There is always a price for purity, and that price is shadow. Because when you deny the body, the soul starts to speak louder. This is not a moral story. It's the spiritual price of no sex, a transformation so deep that most people will never be able to handle it. There is a law in nature that Jung understood better than most. Energy cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed. When you stop expressing sexual energy through the body, that force doesn't vanish into thin air. It doesn't fade away like smoke. It goes somewhere deeper. It sinks into the underground rivers of your psyche, searching for another outlet, another way to exist. And this is where most people get lost. They think abstinence is about control, about willpower, about saying no to the flesh. But Jung knew the truth. You're not stopping anything. You're redirecting everything. Sexual energy is raw, it's primal, it's the same force that makes flowers bloom and wolves hunt under the moon. It's not just about pleasure or reproduction, it's about creation itself. And when you deny it the usual path, it becomes a flood looking for cracks in the dam. Some people channel it into art, others into obsession, some into rage, some into God. But it always moves. It always transforms. The question is, into what? Jung called this process sublimation. But don't let the clinical word fool you. Sublimation is not some peaceful, gentle shift. It's alchemy. It's taking the heat of desire and forcing it through a different container. Imagine a river that's been flowing in one direction for years, and suddenly you build a wall across it. The water doesn't stop, it rises, it floods the banks, it finds new channels, new routes, sometimes carving through rock and soil in ways that reshape the entire landscape. That's what happens inside you when sexual energy is denied its natural release. Most people are terrified of this transformation because they don't understand it. They feel the pressure building, they feel the heat rising, and they think something is wrong. They think they're going crazy. But Jung would say, you're not going crazy, you're waking up. Because that energy, when it turns inward, starts knocking on doors you didn't even know existed. It stirs the unconscious. It activates the shadow. It brings dreams that feel more real than waking life. It creates a tension in the soul that demands resolution. But here's the dangerous part. If you don't understand what's happening, that energy will destroy you from the inside. It will become neurosis. It will become compulsion. It will become a fire that burns without purpose. Jung saw this in his patients over and over again. People who thought they were being virtuous by denying their sexual nature, only to find themselves consumed by irrational fears, violent fantasies, or spiritual delusions. The energy didn't disappear. It just went underground and became something else, something darker, something uncontrolled. This is why the mystics and monks who truly mastered celibacy were not passive. They were not simply restraining themselves. They were warriors of the inner world. They knew that the sexual force had to be met with consciousness, with discipline, with a sacred purpose. They turned that fire into prayer, into meditation, into visions of the divine. They didn't suppress the energy. They transformed it. They gave it a new form, a new language, a new direction. And that's the key. Transformation requires intention. It requires awareness. Without that, you're just a pressure cooker with no release valve. Think about the artists who created their greatest works during periods of celibacy. the writers who poured all their unfulfilled longing into poetry, the inventors whose obsessive focus came from redirecting the energy of desire into discovery. They weren't saints, they were alchemists. They took the raw material of sexual hunger and turned it into something that could outlive the body, something that could touch eternity. But this didn't happen by accident. It happened because they understood, consciously or not, that the energy had to go somewhere, and they chose where. Now, if you're living without sex and you feel nothing, that's a different problem. That's not transformation, that's disconnection, that's numbness. Jung would say you've cut yourself off from the source, because sexual energy is life energy. It's the same current that runs through your ambitions, your creativity, your will to exist. When it's truly absent, you become a ghost. You move through life without presence, without fire, without desire for anything at all. But when it's present and redirected, you become something else entirely. You become a force. So the question is not whether you have sexual desire. The question is, what are you doing with it? Where is it going? Is it being transformed into something greater, or is it rotting in the basement of your unconscious, turning into resentment, bitterness, and despair? Because the energy never dies. It only changes form, and the form it takes depends entirely on you. The moment you close the door on physical desire, something else opens, and it's not always beautiful. Jung warned us about this. He said that every part of ourselves we deny doesn't just go away. It goes into the shadow, and the shadow is patient. It waits, it watches, it grows stronger in the dark. And when you stop feeding the body, the shadow starts demanding attention in ways you can't ignore. The shadow is everything you've pushed down, everything you've been told is wrong, dirty, shameful, or weak. It's the anger you never expressed, the lust you pretended didn't exist, the jealousy you swallowed, the violence you kept locked away. And when sexual energy has nowhere to go, it becomes fuel for the shadow. It makes those hidden parts of you come alive. It gives them power, and suddenly you're not just dealing with a lack of sex, you're dealing with a psychological uprising. This is where people start having intrusive thoughts, fantasies they can't control, dreams so vivid and disturbing, they wake up sweating, heart pounding, wondering what kind of monster they've become. But Jung would say, you're not a monster. You're just meeting parts of yourself you've ignored for too long. The shadow isn't evil. It's just unconscious. And when you starve the body, you force the shadow to reveal itself. Most people run from this. They think if they ignore it, it will go away. They double down on discipline, they pray harder, they fast, they distract themselves with work, with noise, with anything that keeps them from facing what's rising inside. But the shadow doesn't respond to denial, it responds to recognition. It wants to be seen, it wants to be acknowledged, and until you do that, it will haunt you. Jung believed that the path to wholeness required integrating the shadow, not destroying it. That means looking at the parts of yourself you've been taught to hate and finding a way to make peace with them, not acting on every impulse, but understanding where those impulses come from, not becoming a slave to desire, but not pretending you're above it either. This is the razor's edge. This is the work that most people are too afraid to do. When the body stops, the shadow wakes up. And what you do with that awakening determines whether you evolve or collapse. Some people use it as a doorway to deeper self-knowledge. Others let it consume them. The difference is consciousness. The difference is whether you're willing to face what's been buried. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the S.I.M method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. When you deny the body its natural expression, the unconscious doesn't stay silent. It speaks, and its language is dreams. Jung spent his entire life studying this language, decoding the symbols that rise from the depths when consciousness refuses to listen. He discovered that sexual energy, when it has no outlet in waking life, becomes the fuel for the most vivid, most disturbing and most transformative dreams a person can experience. These aren't just random images. They're messages. They're warnings. They're invitations to see what you've been avoiding. People who live without sex often report dreams that feel more real than reality. Dreams where they're chased by wild animals, dreams where they're drowning or flying, dreams filled with strangers who feel intimately familiar, dreams soaked in desire, violence, or terror, and they wake up confused, ashamed, or frightened. But Jung would tell them, pay attention, because the dream is showing you what your waking mind refuses to see. It's showing you the energy that's been dammed up inside and how it's trying to break free. The unconscious doesn't think in words. It thinks in images, in feelings, in stories. And when sexual energy is repressed, it takes on archetypal forms. It becomes the lover you never had, the beast you're afraid to face, the shadow figure lurking in the corner. These aren't just random fantasies. They're the psyche's way of trying to restore balance, because the unconscious always seeks equilibrium. When one side of life is denied, the other side compensates. And it compensates through dreams. Some people dream of having sex with people they've never met, people who don't even exist. Others dream of taboo scenarios that horrify them when they wake up. They feel guilty, as if they've done something wrong, as if the dream itself is proof of their corruption. But Jung understood that dreams don't follow the rules of morality. They follow the rules of the psyche. And the psyche is amoral. It doesn't care about right or wrong. It only cares about balance, about wholeness, about bringing what's hidden into the light. This is why dream analysis was so important to Jung. He knew that the dream was a direct line to the unconscious, a way to see what the ego was refusing to acknowledge. And for people living without sex, dreams become especially potent. They become the stage where all the denied energy plays out in symbolic form. The person who dreams of fire might be experiencing the heat of unexpressed passion. The person who dreams of water might be drowning in emotions they can't process. The person who dreams of being chased might be running from the very desire they've been trying to escape. But here's what most people miss. These dreams aren't punishments. They're not signs that you're failing or falling apart. They're actually signs of life. They're proof that the energy is still there, still moving, still trying to find expression. The worst thing you can do is ignore them. The worst thing you can do is wake up, shake them off, and pretend they didn't mean anything. Because when you do that, the unconscious just gets louder. The dreams get more intense. The symbols get more violent. The psyche will do whatever it takes to get your attention. Jung believed that if you could learn to work with your dreams, you could transform the energy that was trapped inside them. You could take the raw material of repressed desire and turn it into self-knowledge, into creativity, into spiritual insight. But this required courage. It required sitting with the uncomfortable images. It required asking, what is this dream trying to tell me? What part of myself am I refusing to see? What energy am I not allowing to flow? Some people keep dream journals during periods of celibacy and discover patterns they never noticed before. They see the same symbols appearing again and again, the same figures, the same emotions. And slowly they begin to decode the language. They begin to understand that the dream of the seductive stranger isn't about wanting another person. It's about wanting to integrate a part of themselves they've disowned. The dream of violence isn't about becoming violent. It's about the rage of energy that has nowhere to go. The dream of the sacred temple or the divine figure isn't just fantasy. It's the psyche pointing toward transcendence, toward the higher purpose that the redirected energy is meant to serve. This is where the spiritual dimension enters, because when sexual energy is truly transformed, the dreams start to change. They become less chaotic, they become more symbolic. They start pointing toward meaning, toward purpose, toward something beyond the personal. Jung called these big dreams, dreams that don't just reflect your individual life, but connect you to something universal, something eternal. And people who walk the path of celibacy with consciousness often report having these kinds of dreams. Dreams that feel like initiations, dreams that feel like visits from something greater than themselves. But you don't get there by accident. You don't get there by just white-knuckling your way through desire and hoping it goes away. You get there by listening, by paying attention, by treating your dreams as sacred text, as the voice of the soul trying to guide you through the transformation. The dream language of repressed desire is not a curse, it's a map. And if you can learn to read it, it will show you exactly where the energy needs to go. Here is the fork in the road. Here is where everything splits. When sexual energy is denied its natural outlet, it becomes a wildfire. And like any fire, it can do one of two things. It can warm your home, or it can burn it to the ground. Jung saw both outcomes in his work. He saw people who channeled their celibacy into genius, into art, into spiritual breakthroughs that changed their lives forever. And he saw people who spiraled into madness, obsession, and self-destruction. The energy is the same. The difference is what you do with it. Creative fire is what happens when you take that raw sexual force and give it direction. You don't suppress it. You don't pretend it doesn't exist. You acknowledge it, you feel it, and then you pour it into something that matters. This is what the great artists did. This is what the monks did. This is what anyone who has ever created something meaningful out of suffering did. They took the hunger, the longing, the unbearable tension of unfulfilled desire, and they transformed it into something the world could see. A painting, a symphony, a book, a vision, a life that burned brighter because the fire had nowhere else to go. But this path is not easy. It requires discipline, it requires focus, it requires a willingness to sit with discomfort and not reach for the easy escape. Because the sexual urge is powerful. It's designed to be powerful. And when you deny it, you're left holding an enormous amount of energy with no clear place to put it. Most people can't handle that. They crack under the pressure. They fall into distraction, into numbness, into depression. Or worse, they fall into the second path, inner chaos. Inner chaos is what happens when the energy has no container. It's what happens when you repress desire without giving it a new form. The fire doesn't go out. It just spreads. It becomes anxiety. It becomes rage. It becomes paranoia. It becomes compulsive behavior that makes no sense but feels impossible to stop. You find yourself obsessing over things that don't matter. You find yourself picking fights for no reason. You find yourself unable to sleep, unable to focus, unable to feel anything except a low-grade sense of dread that follows you everywhere. Jung called this psychic inflation. It's when the unconscious floods the conscious mind because there's no boundary, no structure, no way to channel what's rising up. And people in this state often feel like they're losing their minds. They have intrusive thoughts. They have irrational fears. They feel disconnected from reality. And the worst part is, they don't know why. They don't connect the dots between their celibacy and their inner turmoil. They just think something is wrong with them. They think they're broken. But they're not broken. They're just drowning in unprocessed energy. This is why intention matters so much. This is why you can't just stop having sex and expect everything to be fine. You have to know why you're doing it. You have to have a purpose. Are you doing it because you're afraid of intimacy? Are you doing it because you hate your body? Are you doing it because you think suffering will make you holy? If your reasons are rooted in shame or fear, the energy will turn toxic. It will eat you alive from the inside. But if your reasons are rooted in purpose, in vision, in the desire to transform that energy into something greater than momentary pleasure, then you have a chance. Then the fire becomes fuel instead of destruction. Jung believed that creativity and sexuality were deeply linked. He said they both came from the same source, the libido, the life force, the raw energy of existence itself. And when you block one, you either awaken the other or you suffocate both. There's no middle ground. You either rise or you collapse. And the deciding factor is whether you're willing to do the work, whether you're willing to face the fire, to feel its heat, and to consciously direct it towards something meaningful. Think about the difference between someone who stops having sex and becomes bitter, resentful, and obsessed with what they're missing, versus someone who stops having sex and becomes more focused, more driven, more alive with purpose. The first person is being consumed by the fire, the second person is wielding it. And the only difference is consciousness. The only difference is whether they're aware of what's happening inside them and whether they're willing to take responsibility for where that energy goes. This is not about morality. This is not about being good or bad. This is about power. Sexual energy is power. And like any power, it can be used or it can be wasted. It can build or it can destroy. The question is, which path are you on? Are you channeling the fire into something that will outlast you? Or are you letting it burn you from the inside out because the energy doesn't care? It will do what energy does. It will move. It will transform. And if you're not steering it, it will steer you. There is a loneliness that comes with celibacy that nobody talks about. It's not just the absence of touch. It's not just the empty bed or the quiet nights. It's something deeper. It's the loneliness of walking a path that almost no one else understands. It's the isolation that comes when you realize you're doing something that separates you from the normal rhythm of human life. And Jung knew this loneliness well. He called it the loneliness of individuation, the loneliness of becoming who you really are, even when it means standing apart from everyone else. Most people avoid loneliness at all costs. They fill their lives with noise, with people, with distractions, with anything that keeps them from feeling the emptiness. But when you choose celibacy, whether by circumstance or by choice, you're forced into that emptiness. You can't escape it. You can't numb it with physical connection. You have to sit in it. You have to feel it. And this is where the initiation begins, because loneliness, when you stop running from it, becomes a doorway. It becomes the space where the soul starts to speak. Jung believed that true spiritual growth required separation. He said that before you could connect with something greater, you had to disconnect from the collective. You had to step away from the noise, the expectations, the comfort of fitting in. And celibacy forces that separation. It makes you different. It makes you other. And in that otherness, something profound happens. You start to hear the voice inside that you've been drowning out your entire life. You start to feel the presence of something beyond the physical, beyond the human, beyond the temporary. This is why every spiritual tradition has some form of celibacy in its path. Not because sex is evil, not because the body is shameful, but because there are certain truths you can only access through solitude. There are certain depths you can only reach when you're alone. And loneliness, when embraced consciously, becomes the crucible where the soul is forged. It burns away everything superficial. It strips you down to what's real. And what's left is either emptiness or essence. People who live without sex for extended periods often describe feeling like they're living in a different world than everyone else. They watch their friends fall in love, get married, have children, and they feel like they're watching from behind glass. They hear people talk about desire, about passion, about the thrill of new relationships, and it sounds like a foreign language. And this distance, this sense of not belonging, can be unbearable. It can make you question everything. It can make you wonder if you've made a terrible mistake, but Jung would say this is exactly where you need to be. This is the desert. This is the dark night. This is the place where the ego dies and something else is born. Because loneliness strips away all the illusions. It shows you who you are when no one is watching. It shows you what you're made of when there's no external validation, no physical comfort, no distraction from the rawness of existence. And if you can survive that, if you can sit in that fire without running, you come out changed. The mystics understood this. They called it the via negativa, the path of negation, the path of stripping away everything until only truth remains. And celibacy is one form of that path. It's the negation of physical union in order to discover spiritual union. It's the sacrifice of earthly connection in order to find cosmic connection. And it's brutal, it's lonely, it's painful. But for those who walk it consciously, it becomes the most meaningful thing they've ever done. Jung talked about the self, the deep center of the psyche that exists beyond the ego. And he said that the journey to the self is always a lonely journey. Because the self is not something you find in another person. It's not something you find in pleasure or comfort or safety. It's something you find in the silence, in the solitude, in the moments when you're stripped of everything external and forced to face what's internal. But here's what most people don't realize. The loneliness doesn't last forever. It's not a permanent state. It's a phase. It's a passage. And on the other side of it, there's a different kind of connection. Not the connection of bodies, but the connection of souls. Not the connection to one person, but the connection to everything. People who move through the loneliness of celibacy often report feeling more connected to life than they ever did before. More connected to nature, to beauty, to the sacred, to the quiet presence that runs through all things. This is the gift hidden inside the loneliness. This is why it's an initiation and not just suffering. Because when you stop trying to escape it, when you stop resenting it, when you stop wishing it were different, something shifts. The loneliness becomes solitude, the emptiness becomes spaciousness, and the silence becomes a language you finally understand. So maybe the real question isn't why God starves some people of sexual desire. Maybe the question is, what are you becoming in the silence? What's being forged in the fire of your loneliness? Because the truth is, most people will never know. They'll run from it their entire lives. They'll fill the void with bodies, with pleasure, with anything that keeps them from facing what's really there. But you're different. You're walking through the door most people are too afraid to open. And on the other side, you'll either find nothing or you'll find everything. The question is, are you brave enough to find out which one it is?